You can make your donut wall any size that you would like. This one happens to be about 31 inches by 31 inches, and that's because it was two pieces of scrap plywood that I had that happened to be at those dimensions once I glued them together because my friend did want this to be square. You can have a big box store cut down plywood to any size that you want. You can cut it down yourself with even just a circular saw. Or you can buy the 2 foot by 4 foot pieces or 2 foot by 2 foot pieces that are already pre-cut at your store. The donuts for these wall are going to be 4-inch donuts, so I'm going to start in at 3 inches and then mark out approximately every 5 inches for both the vertical and horizontal sections. This wall will hold 5 donuts vertically and 6 donuts across horizontally, so that there'll be 30 pegs, and you can put 2 donuts on each peg, so it will hold 5 dozen donuts and leave room for me to be able to put a message at the top and the bottom of the board. Next, on each of my marks, I'm going to punch just a little starter hole, and by doing this, it allows me to not have my drill bit start to walk on me, particularly because I'm using a regular drill bit for this. I'm not able to use a nice flat Forstner bit because the dowels that I had are kind of an off size. You can even just use a nail or a small drill bit, or even drill a small pilot hole to do this. So next I'm going to apply tape to my drill bit, and I'm just going to use a piece of scrap plywood to reference my depth, and so I want to get the dowels in as deep as I can without going through. So I want my tape set just a little bit under the 3/4 dimension of the plywood. Now I'm just going to drill directly down because I have quite a bit of practice with the drill, and so I'm pretty good at being able to get my drill hole fairly straight. But this is just a little tip if you are not as comfortable with doing this. So after you've marked your hole, you can just take 2 little blocks of wood and glue them together, or just simply tape them together to make a nice 90-degree angle. And then you can use this as a guide to help you make sure that you're keeping your drill bit straight up and down. Now if I want to add tape to this, I'm going to reference off of with the block of wood in place, and then go another 1/2 inch or so past that, so that I get mostly through the plywood. Ideally, I would have preferred to use a Forstner bit. I think that they drill a lot cleaner actually, and a little bit easier to keep them straight. But my store was out of 3/8 inch dowels, and I already had the 7/16 inch dowels, and it's not easy to just find a Forstner bit that's a 7/16 at your big box store, and I needed to get this project done. So that's why I ended up with just a regular drill bit. So whatever method you decide to use is great, and just make sure that you keep checking your tape fairly regularly, because it's possible to just keep pushing it up just a millimeter at a time with each hole, and by the time you get closer to the end you might be in trouble. I used my power miter saw to make really quick work of cutting all of the dowels down to about 4 inches apiece. But these pine dowels really cut very easily by hand as well. So if you don't have a power miter saw, no worries, you can just with a hand saw cut these very simply. I decided to do a 2-tone board, and I used an espresso for one side and a whitewash type stain for the other side. Now, staining with a tape line can be very interesting, because stain of course wants to absorb into the wood. So you just with a rag want to be very, very careful to apply it very, very lightly along the line so that none of it can pool underneath the tape. Once that stain's pretty dry to the touch, then you can go ahead and apply the tape to the other side, and you just want to use, this is actually a delicate surface tape, but any painter's tape that's a pretty clean pull, easy to remove, light stick kind of tape will work totally fine for this. And then same thing, you just want to apply with a rag very lightly, especially along the tape line. Now a donut wall just plain with no words is also super cool. So if you don't have a vinyl cutter, no worries. If you do, or you know someone who does, then you can either personalize it or just make it kind of silly. A whole lot of love, donut, mind if I do, anything, based on whole or donut. There's all kinds of things out there. So you can be as dorky as you want to be. So basically you just put this clear transfer tape stuff over the template once you have taken the letters out. And this was at the very end of my roll, so some of it wasn't sticking great, but then you take the stencil and put it down onto your work surface, and then you rub it down with your kind of scraper deal, and then remove the transfer tape. And then at that point you can go ahead and paint on the letters. For the top part, I did try to use the white stain, which I knew could kind of run, and it kind of did. So for the bottom, I decided to use a paint that was pretty similar to the top of the board, and then just kind of really rub it out so that it looked more like a stain. To give it a more finished look, I decided to put a frame around it, but this is totally optional. It would have been super cute even without this. And I'm gonna go ahead and rip down some oak that I had, but you can buy, 1/4 inch by 1 inch wide trim, which will be totally sufficient for this application. Since the sides that you'll see more would be the two sides instead of the top and bottom, I'm going to have the sides be the part that's going to be continuous, and the top and bottom are going to be the shorter parts. I'm not going to try to 45 these and miter them in. This is something very simple. So you can just mark it out, cut your piece, and then once you have the top and bottom pieces, just put them together on one side. Hold it flush, and then mark the other side. And then you're going to have all 4 pieces done pretty easily. And for thin trim like this, it's just as easy to just use the hand saw and little miter box instead of using the power miter saw. So since this is two-toned, I went ahead and pre-finished all of the trim so that I don't risk getting some of that espresso stain onto my whitewash area. So this makes it very quick and easy to just attach this. I'm just going to use a little pin nailer, a brad nailer would be fine, or even just glue and clamps would totally be fine. I applied some spray lacquer before I put the dowels in, and I did this for 2 reasons. One, once the dowels are in, you're never going to get a nice smooth coat because they're always going to be blocking some of the spray. And for 2, I actually wanted to leave the dowels more natural, since that's what the donuts are going to actually be hanging on. Sure, they'll touch the board a little bit, but this had plenty of time to cure, so it's just the same as if food touched your table, you would still eat it. So I'm not worried about the food safety component there. When you're doing something like a cutting board where you're actually cutting into that finish, that's where it becomes a bigger issue. I gave the outside of the dowels a very quick sand so they'd be smooth for putting the donuts on and off. So I pounded the dowels in 1 row at a time, and I found that a little bit of glue and then actually taking the eraser end of a pencil worked best for distributing the glue lightly instead of a little paintbrush, so that I didn't have bristles and glue getting on the outside of the hole. So I'm using a wooden mallet to hit these in. You could use a rubber mallet, but then I just put a piece of wood on top so that you don't get any, black rubber on the outside of your dowels. You could even use a regular hammer, just again, put a piece of wood on top, and any way to get them in there will be totally fine. Now, you'll notice that little block, it's called a 1, 2, 3 block. It's 1 inch by 2 inch by 3 inches, and it's perfectly square. I tend to use this for all kinds of random things, and in this application, I grabbed it just to check and make sure that my dowels were going in nice and square. So once all the dowels were installed, then it was pretty much time to party. So if you are enjoying my work, please like and subscribe. If you would like more beginning level tutorials like this one, please let me know in the comments. I'm still trying to get a feel for what kind of content is going to be best for my channel. I love building things, and if I can inspire somebody else to do so, then that's awesome. So I really hope that you have an amazing time building something.